On a street in Nicosia, you'll find cafes, shops, and tourists taking photos. Walk just a few meters further, and the street ends abruptly, blocked by barrels, barbed wire, and a UN guard post. This is not a relic of the Cold War. It's the daily reality in Nicosia, the capital of Cyprus, and the only capital city in Europe still physically divided. Down the middle of the city runs the Green Line, a buffer zone policed by United Nations peacekeepers. In places, it's barely wide enough to fit a car. In others, it stretches for kilometers. On one side lies the Republic of Cyprus, a modern European Union member state. On the other, the self-declared Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, recognized only by Turkey. Inside the buffer zone, entire neighborhoods have sat abandoned since 1974. There are other contested capitals. Jerusalem is claimed by two nations, but not cut apart by a militarized frontier. Berlin was once split by a wall, but that wall came down more than 3 decades ago. Nicosia is different. Here, the line is still in place. This video explores how Cyprus's long history as a crossroads of empires created fragile divisions, how a brief independence collapsed into conflict, and how a pencil line on a map hardened into Europe's last divided capital. Cyprus's division cannot be understood without its history. The island sits in the eastern Mediterranean, a short distance from Turkey, Syria, and Egypt, and only a few hundred kilometers from Greece. Its position made it one of the most valuable pieces of territory in the region. The earliest settlements here go back thousands of years, but it was during the classical era that Cyprus first became a true crossroads. The island absorbed Greek culture, was contested by the Persian Empire, and eventually fell under Roman and later Byzantine rule. Christianity spread early, and the Orthodox Church became a defining feature of Cypriot identity. In the Middle Ages, the Crusaders captured Cyprus, followed by the Venetians. They left a lasting mark on the capital, massive stone walls built in the 16th century that still encircle the old city of Nicosia today. These walls are almost perfectly circular, with 11 bastions and 3 gates, and they remain one of the most visible reminders of Cyprus's long role as a fortress between East and West. In 1571, the Ottoman Empire took control. For more than 300 years, Cyprus was ruled from Constantinople, and the city of Nicosia was reshaped with mosques, markets, and Ottoman administrative systems. The Gothic Cathedral of St. Sophia was converted into the Selimiye Mosque, a physical transformation that still defines the city skyline. This period also established a significant Turkish-speaking population, creating the ethnic and cultural divide that continues today. In 1878, Britain assumed administration of the island, later annexing it outright during World War I. British rule introduced modern infrastructure, but also fostered nationalist movements, Greek Cypriots seeking union with Greece, and Turkish Cypriots fearing marginalization. By the time Cyprus gained independence in 1960, these centuries of layered influence had left behind not unity, but fault lines. In 1960, Cyprus finally became independent after more than 80 years of British control. The new republic was designed as a partnership. Power was split between the Greek Cypriot majority and the Turkish Cypriot minority. The constitution guaranteed Turkish Cypriots a vice presidency, a share of government posts, and veto powers. But the system quickly broke down. For many Turkish Cypriots, the early years of independence felt increasingly insecure. Violence in mixed neighborhoods pushed families to flee, and the community began to see partition or Turkish guarantees as the only way to survive. By 1963, disputes over constitutional amendments triggered violence between the two communities. British troops were called in to restore order. To separate the fighting, a British general named Peter Young drew a ceasefire line on a map with a green chinograph pencil. What began as a temporary measure was soon called the Green Line. It cut across the centre of Nicosia, dividing neighbourhoods with nothing more than chalk marks, oil barrels, and sandbags. The most visible symbol of this new frontier was the Ledra Palace Hotel. Before the fighting, it was the city's most glamorous building, hosting galas and foreign dignitaries. After 1964, it became a military post and later the headquarters of the United Nations Peacekeeping Force in Cyprus, UNFICYP. The building still stands today, its facade scarred by bullet holes. By the late 1960s, the capital was already living with a front line running down its middle. Though people could still cross, daily life was increasingly divided. The Green Line was meant to be temporary, but the fragile balance of independence was already starting to unravel. As we delve deeper into Nicosia's divided history, you bring these stories to life. Keep liking and sharing to help me continue this journey. Don't forget to subscribe and share your insights in the comments as we continue to explore the world together. By the early 1970s, the Green Line already divided Nicosia on paper, but the island itself remained intact. That changed suddenly in the summer of 1974. On July 15th, a coup backed by the Greek military junta overthrew the Cypriot president, Archbishop Makarios. The coup leaders aimed to achieve enosis, the formal union of Cyprus with Greece. For Turkey, the coup posed an existential threat to the Turkish Cypriot community. Ankara invoked its role as a guarantor power under the 1960 independence treaties and launched what it called a peace operation. Greek Cypriots, meanwhile, saw it as an invasion and occupation. The reality is that both communities were uprooted. Greek Cypriots forced south, Turkish Cypriots forced north. Turkish forces landed on the northern coast and pushed inland. Despite international calls for a ceasefire, the operation expanded in a second phase a month later, ultimately seizing about 37% of the island's territory. The outcome was a permanent partition. The human impact was immediate. Roughly 200,000 people, about one-third of the population, became refugees overnight, forced to flee homes now on the opposite side of the front line. Greek Cypriots fled south, Turkish Cypriots moved north. Entire communities were uprooted, leaving villages, farms, and city blocks deserted. In Nicosia, the Green Line hardened into a militarized frontier. The once temporary sandbags and barrels were replaced with checkpoints, barbed wire, and guard posts. The city's airport, which had been Cyprus's international gateway, was caught inside the buffer zone. Abandoned in 1974, it still sits today as one of the most expensive pieces of real estate in Europe that cannot be used. Perhaps the most striking symbols are the small details left behind: furniture still inside shops, cars parked mid-street, and the so-called yellow car, a Morris Minor abandoned near Ledra Palace. The dispute over its exact location was so intense that the UN had to paint two parallel ceasefire lines around it, because opposing forces couldn't agree which side of the line it belonged to. For decades, UN patrols used this absurd landmark as a reference point inside the buffer zone. The United Nations also expanded its mission here. It has become one of the longest-running UN peacekeeping operations in the world, a sign of just how enduring the stalemate has been. What began as a ceasefire line drawn with a pencil became a permanent frontier cutting through the island, and through its capital. More than 50 years after 1974, the Green Line still runs through the middle of Nicosia. Today, it defines daily life in subtle but constant ways. Crossing from one side to the other is now possible. In 2003, the first checkpoints were opened, and the most symbolic crossing, Ledra Street, was restored in 2008. Visitors can walk past border guards and enter a completely different administrative zone within minutes. Yet despite this access, the two halves of the city remain strikingly different. In the south, Nicosia functions as the capital of the Republic of Cyprus, complete with modern shopping streets, EU flags, and new high-rise developments. The north serves as the capital of the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, recognized only by Turkey. Decades of non-recognition and international embargoes have left its economy more dependent on Turkey for trade and support, and the Turkish lira is used instead of the euro. Walking across the line means stepping into a place that feels both familiar, yet shaped by very different political and economic circumstances. The contrast is also visible from a distance. On the mountain ridge north of the city, a giant Turkish Cypriot flag, measuring 426 meters across, has been painted and illuminated. It is visible from nearly everywhere in the southern capital, a reminder of the unresolved conflict. Yet there are rare exceptions. In the village of Pila, inside the UN buffer zone, Greek and Turkish Cypriots continue to live side by side, each with their own schools and local leaders. It is the only community on the island that still maintains this coexistence. For younger generations, this is the only reality they have known. Unlike Berlin, where division was temporary, Nicosia has endured for decades, shaping not just politics but identity. Nicosia's story is unusual, not because it was divided, but because it remains divided. Many cities have been split by politics or conflict. Berlin during the Cold War, Vienna at the end of World War II, even Jerusalem today. But in all of these cases, the divisions either ended or were absorbed into broader political struggles. Nicosia is different. A ceasefire line that began as a pencil mark in 1963 was reinforced by war in 1974 and has endured ever since. It left behind not just abandoned buildings and empty streets, but an entire generation that has never experienced a united capital. Talks aimed at reunification continue, but decades of mistrust, economic divergence, and competing national identities make a settlement elusive. In the meantime, the Green Line remains in place, patrolled by UN peacekeepers who have been on the island longer than almost anywhere else in the world. Berlin's wall fell more than 30 years ago. Jerusalem remains contested but connected. For Greek Cypriots, the Green Line represents an unfinished occupation. For Turkish Cypriots, it is a safeguard that prevented domination. And for the wider world, it remains Europe's last divided capital, an unresolved border drawn in pencil that still defines the heart of a city. For more captivating adventures and explorations of incredible places around the world, click on the video on screen now. Your next journey awaits. Happy travels.